The spring wind cut sharp across the empty Montana plain as June Hollis knelt by 3 rough-hewn crosses, her tears darkening the raw earth. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. In 1873, she was only 22, and in one brutal week, fever had taken her father Silas Rourke, her brother Cole Rourke, and her sister-in-law Ada Rourke. Everything she loved, buried beneath that unforgiving ground. A low sob carried over the prairie and reached Wade Cross before he even caught sight of her. The seasoned cowhand, 30 and trail-worn, halted his chestnut mare. Years of drifting from one job to the next had made him slow to care, yet something in that lonely cry pulled him forward. He swung down from the saddle and walked in quietly so as not to startle her. Wind tugged at June's loose auburn hair, and each tremor in her shoulders told him the story the crosses did not need to spell out. Ma'am, Wade said gently, hat in hand. "Do you need help?" June turned her face, streaked with tears and dust. For a long breath, neither of them spoke, the endless Montana sky hanging silent above. "They're gone," she finally managed, voice raw. "My father, my brother, my sister-in-law. Fever took them all in a single week." "I'm mighty sorry for your loss," Wade said, his tone low and steady. "What am I supposed to do now?" The question sounded more like a prayer to the heavens than to the stranger before her. "I can't keep this homestead alone. I just can't." Wade shifted his boots in the dirt. He'd outrun sorrow many times, but this woman had nowhere to run. "Any kin back east you can write to?" "No one," June said, shaking her head. "Father brought us out here after Mother died. Said Montana would give us a fresh start." A bitter laugh escaped her. Some start. Wade's eyes traveled to the small cabin in the distance, lean-to, stable, half-plowed field, a sagging chicken coop. It wasn't much, and no woman alone could hold it for long. "Night's coming," he said, glancing at the sinking sun. "You shouldn't be out here after dark. Let me see you back to your cabin." June studied him at last. He was tall and broad-shouldered, lines of hard miles etched around steady eyes. His clothes were worn, but clean. Desperation left her no choice but trust. "Thank you, Mr. Wade Cross," he said with a nod. "June Hollis," she answered, slipping her hand into his calloused grip and rising. They walked toward the cabin with his mare trailing behind. The silence pressed heavy until June murmured, "I'll likely have to sell." "Though who would buy a place so far from town, and where would I even go?" Wade said nothing, weighing her words. By the time they reached the porch, an idea had begun to take shape, one he hadn't imagined when the day began. "Miss Hollis," he said, as she worked the key in the door, "I know it's forward of me being a stranger and all, but I can swing a hammer and turn a field. Let me help you set things right before you decide your next move." June hesitated. "Why would you do that?" He ran a hand through his dark hair. "I've ridden from ranch to ranch more years than I care to count. Never stayed long enough to watch a harvest or finish a house. Maybe it's time I did." What he didn't say was that the sight of her beside those graves had woken an ache he knew too well. "I can't pay you," June admitted. "The farm hasn't brought in profit yet." "Room and board will do," Wade replied. "Just a corner of the barn for my horse." Taking in a stranger went against everything she'd been taught, yet the thought of facing the wilderness alone chilled her more than the wind. "2 weeks," she said at last. "Help me for 2 weeks and maybe I'll know what to do next." "2 weeks it is," Wade agreed, sealing it with a firm handshake. Neither guessed how those 2 weeks would stretch into months, changing their lives forever. Dawn broke, bright and cold. June, sleepless, set out cornbread and coffee, her mind still tumbling with grief and worry. Wade stepped in just as she finished hair damp from the pump clothes trail-worn but neat. "Morning, Miss Hollis," he said, hat in hand. "Hope I'm not too early." "Not at all," she answered, motioning to the table. "Please join me." "It's nothing fancy." "Simple suits me fine," Wade said, sitting only after she did. His easy manners hinted at a better upbringing than his rugged look suggested. They ate mostly in silence until June finally said I should show you around the homestead after breakfast. "There's so much to fix, I hardly know where to start." "Then we start with whatever matters most," Wade replied. "What needs fixing first?" Wade Cross asked, setting down his coffee cup. June Hollis rubbed her brow, the list heavy on her mind. The roof leaks every time it rains. The north field still needs plowing. The chicken coop is falling apart. And the well pump sticks. Her voice trailed off, almost lost under the weight of so many problems. Wade nodded after a pause. "Roof comes first. Can't have you getting soaked inside your own cabin." After breakfast, they walked the acreage together. Under the Homestead Act, her family had claimed 160 acres, though only 20 were fenced and cleared. A narrow creek edged the eastern side, feeding 3 hens, a milk cow, and an aging mule. Your father knew good land when he saw it. Wade observed, studying the soil. This ground is worth every ounce of sweat. June's eyes softened. He believed in it, had so many plans. Catching the quiver in her voice, Wade shifted the talk. "That barn will need shoring up before the next windstorm. I'll patch the roof today, barn tomorrow." True to his word, Wade spent the day high on the cabin roof, moving with sure-footed skill as he swapped broken shingles and sealed leaks. June watched from below, amazed at how easily he worked. By late afternoon, he tightened the last nail just as dark clouds rolled in. Pointing west, he called, "Right on time. Storm's coming." June's heart jumped. The garden, the seedlings. Together they dashed to the small vegetable plot, draping canvas over the young shoots as fat raindrops splattered the soil. They reached the porch just as the heavens opened, rain drumming in wild sheets. "Thank you," June said, breathless. Those plants were Cole's pride. He started them from last year's seeds. Wade tipped his hat to shake off the water. "Your brother had a green thumb. He said coaxing life from dirt was a kind of miracle." June murmured, a wistful smile touching her lips. They stood side by side, watching the rain silver the fields. For the first time since her family's deaths, a small calm settled over June. The grief remained, but the terror of being utterly alone had eased. "Will you stay for supper, Mr. Cross?" she asked as the rain softened. "It's the least I can do after all your hard work." "I'd be honored," he said, his voice gentle. "And call me Wade. Mr. Cross was my father, and I'm nothing like him." Something in his tone hinted at old wounds, but June let it rest. "Then Wade it is," she said with a faint smile. That evening set a pattern. Wade worked from dawn till dusk, mending and building, while June cared for the garden, livestock, and home. At night, they shared plain meals and slow conversations that grew easier with each passing day. She learned that he'd left Boston at 17 after clashing with his merchant father. One job had led to another until 10 restless years had slipped away. "I never planned on being a drifter." Wade admitted one firefly-lit evening on the porch. But one trail led to the next, and before I knew it, a decade was gone. "Doesn't it get lonely?" June asked, then blushed. "I'm sorry that's too personal." "It's fair," he assured her. "And yes, I suppose it does. But drifting loneliness feels different than sitting still with nothing but silence." June nodded. "The quiet in this cabin is the hardest. I keep expecting to hear Father's boots on the porch or Cole's laugh." "What was your father like?" Wade asked. "Stubborn," she said, with a sad grin. determined. He taught school back in Ohio, but always dreamed of wide-open country. After Mother died, there was nothing to keep us there. And you share that dream. I wanted what he wanted. I thought if we could make this place thrive, he'd find joy again. On the 10th day, a cold rain kept them inside. Wade set aside wagon repairs to help June sift through her late father's papers at the kitchen table. "There are so many," she said, overwhelmed. "I hardly know what any of them mean." Patiently, Wade sorted the stacks. "This is your land deed. These are seed orders for next season. And this," he stopped reading closer, "this is a loan contract." June's face went pale. "A loan, Father never mentioned a loan. It's from a man named Grant Pike in Helena." Wade said, his brow tightening. $200 borrowed last fall, due by the end of this month. 200, June whispered, stricken. "We don't have anywhere near that." "There's more," Wade went on. "If the debt isn't paid, Pike can claim part of this homestead." June sank back, devastation flooding her. "We could lose everything." "Not if I can help it," Wade said quickly. "There's still time. Spring cattle drives will be through soon. I can sign on and earn enough to cover it." "You'd do that?" June asked, stunned. "After all you've already done?" He met her eyes, steady as a fence post. "I gave my word to help. I'm not finished yet." The truth ran deeper. Working beside June had awakened a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The thought of her losing the only home she had stirred something fierce inside him. "We'll find a way," Wade promised. The next morning, Wade Cross saddled up and headed toward Riverford, a dusty little settlement about 8 miles from the Hollis homestead. He carried June's supply list and a quiet urgency he needed both goods and news about the spring cattle drives. June had offered to ride along, but he'd gently urged her to stay back and care for the stock. Riverford wasn't much to look at. One muddy main street lined with a saloon, a blacksmith's shed, a few wooden shacks, and a single general store with a creaky bell above the door. Wade tied his chestnut mare and stepped inside. The bell jingled, and Zeke Carver, the balding shopkeeper with wire spectacles, peered up from his ledger. "Morning, stranger. What can I get you?" "Some supplies," Wade said, laying June's list on the counter. "And a bit of news if you have it." As Zeke packed flour, coffee, and nails, Wade asked about the cattle drives. The answer was grim. "Heavy rains up north. Rivers are swollen. Word is they won't be through for at least a month, maybe longer." Wade's stomach tightened. The payment to Grant Pike came due in less than 3 weeks. "Ever hear of a man named Grant Pike?" he asked casually. Zeke's face darkened. "Pike's a shrewd one. Owns half of Helena and a fair share of farms out here. Folks say he's got the law in his back pocket. Why?" "Just heard the name," Wade replied lightly, careful not to reveal June's troubles. "My advice, steer clear. He has a way of making other folks' land his own." Wade paid and stepped into the street, mind heavy with what he'd learned. He had just secured the supplies when a voice called out, "You're staying out at the Hollis place, aren't you?" Wade turned to find a broad-shouldered man in his 40s walking over. He wore a rancher's clothes, but with the polish of success. "That's right," Wade said. "And you are Rhett Boone. I own the Triple P Ranch south of here. Heard about the loss Miss Hollis suffered, sad business." Wade shook his hand, sizing him up. Boone went on. "If she's thinking of selling, I'd like to make an offer. That creek of hers would do wonders for my herd." "As far as I know, Miss Hollis isn't looking to sell," Wade replied evenly, though he couldn't shake the worry about the looming debt. Boone shrugged. "Well, if she changes her mind, tell her I'll pay fair market value." He studied Wade a moment. "You planning on sticking around?" "Don't know yet," Wade answered truthfully. I could use a man with your build and know-how, Boone said. Good wages and there's a cabin on my spread if you want it. It was tempting steady pay and a roof. A year ago, Wade might have accepted without a thought. But the idea of leaving June to face her troubles alone didn't sit right. I appreciate the offer, he said, but I've got commitments at the Hollis place for now. Boone nodded, unreadable. Offer stands if you change your mind. Good day. As Wade rode home, Boone's words lingered. If June were forced to sell, at least Boone seemed ready to pay fairly. Yet something about the man's quick interest in that creek stirred unease. By sunset, the glow of lamplight through the cabin window warmed Wade's chest. Smoke curled from the chimney, and for a fleeting moment the homestead felt like something he'd never had before home. June stepped from the barn, brushing straw from her apron. You were gone so long I started to worry. Got caught up talking in town, Wade said, unloading the supplies. How'd things go here? Well enough, she answered. I mended the fence in the south pasture like you showed me, though I can't swear it'll hold. He smiled at her grit. We'll check it together tomorrow. Over supper, Wade told her about the delayed drives and Grant Pike's hard reputation. June's face tightened with each word. So we can't earn the money in time, she said, setting down her fork. And this Pike won't likely give us extra days. There might be another way, Wade said carefully. I met Rhett Boone in town. He wants to buy the property. June's head snapped up. Sell. This land was my father's dream. I know, Wade said gently. But Boone claims he'd pay fair value. And where would I go? What would I do? Her voice rose sharp with fear and anger. Wade had no answer. Those were the same questions gnawing at him on the long ride back. We still have time, he said at last. Let's not decide anything tonight. Later, lying in the hayloft, Wade couldn't quiet his thoughts. His 2 promised weeks were almost over, yet the idea of riding away felt empty and wrong. In June's quiet strength, he had found something he hadn't known he was seeking. Morning brought no solution, only the certainty that the loan had to be faced. While they worked side by side patching the chicken coop, Wade finally voiced the plan that had kept him awake. I've been thinking on Pike's note, he said, measuring a board. What if we ride to Helena and talk to him straight? June looked up from the wire she was stretching. Face him ourselves. That's a 3-day trip. It is, Wade admitted. But maybe if he sees how well you're working the land, he'll grant more time. Or he might demand payment on the spot once he sees how desperate we are, June countered. Could be, Wade agreed. But sitting still means certain loss. June was quiet for a long moment, her hands pausing mid-task. If we go, who tends the animals and crops? I know a boy in town, Wade said. Luke Dugan. Boone's son hires him for odd jobs. He could watch things a few days. We? June echoed softly, catching his choice of words. Wade met her gaze and held it. Yes, we. I won't let you face Grant Pike alone. I won't let you face Grant Pike alone. Something quiet but unshakable passed between Wade Cross and June Hollis in that moment, a vow that whatever lay ahead, they'd stand shoulder to shoulder. The understanding brought a strange comfort and a spark of new tension, as if a line they'd kept clear had suddenly blurred. Then we ride to Helena, June said, her chin lifting with steady resolve. 2 days later, they set out. The spring road was a mire of ruts and mud, every mile hard won. Wade borrowed a small wagon from a nearby homesteader so June could ride more easily than on horseback. Even so, each evening they climbed down bone-tired and caked in dust conversation, falling away to their own uneasy thoughts about the meeting to come. By the 3rd evening, Helena rose before them, a bustling gulch city built on gold strikes. Brick storefronts and tall wooden hotels crowded the streets. Saloons spilled music into the air. Wagons and horses clogged the avenues while townsfolk threaded the plank sidewalks. June's eyes widened. "It's overwhelming," she murmured, as Wade helped her down before a modest hotel. "Best not show it," he said quietly. "Pike needs to see you as an equal, not some country girl to push around." They paid for 2 small rooms, wincing at the cost, and after scrubbing away the trail dust, dressed in their best June, in her late mother's simple blue dress, Wade in a clean shirt, and his least worn vest. Together they walked to the Mercantile Bank and climbed the stairs to Pike's office. Inside Wealth showed in every detail a massive desk, leather-bound books, and a broad window over the lively street. Yet Grant Pike himself was lean and bookish, with thinning hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He rose smoothly. "Miss Hollis," he said, glancing at the loan papers. "My condolences. Your father spoke well of you when we met last fall." "Thank you, Mr. Pike," June replied, her voice steadier than Wade expected. "I've come about the loan." "Yes, due at month's end," Pike said, his ledger exact to the day. "I trust you're here to settle the account." June drew a breath. "Mr. Pike, my family's deaths have left me in a hard place. The homestead is only beginning to yield. I can't yet pay the full amount." Pike's expression barely shifted. His calculating gaze moved to Wade. "And you are Wade Cross," he answered. A hired hand, Pike asked, suspicion edging his voice. "A friend," Wade said evenly. Pike returned his attention to June. "Friend or not, the terms remain $200 due by month's end, or the eastern acreage with its creek passes to me." "I'm asking for more time," June said firmly. 3 months, with added interest if needed." Pike leaned back, fingers steepled. "An extension is irregular. Your father agreed to these terms. My father didn't expect to die before the note came. Due." June shot back, heat flashing through her composure. Wade touched her arm in quiet warning and faced Pike. "Surely there's an arrangement that works for both sides. She means to honor the debt, just needs time." Pike studied them for a long beat, then said, "There may be another path. I own several businesses, including a respectable boarding house needing a manager. The position pays a salary and includes room and board. You could sell your homestead, Rhett Boone has already shown interest, and use the proceeds to settle what's owed. You'd even have funds left for a fresh start." June stiffened. "That's your answer. Walk away from my family's land, it's practical," Pike replied smoothly. "A single woman running a remote spread is at best unwise. She's not alone." Wade broke in, surprising even himself with the steel in his voice. "She has help." Pike's eyes flicked between them, reading more than either spoke aloud. "For now, perhaps. But Mr. Cross, men of your kind rarely stay." Wade felt the truth of that challenge, but held Pike's gaze. June's voice was calm and resolute. "Mr. Pike, I respect your offer, but I will not sell my father's dream. I'm requesting 3 more months and will pay additional interest to prove my intent." Pike removed his spectacles and polished them with a slow sigh. "I admire your resolve, misguided though it may be. 1 month, no more. The note will come due at the end of June, plus 15% interest." 15, Wade burst out. "That's daylight robbery." "That's business," Pike said coolly. "I assume the risk, I name the rate." June set a steady hand on Wade's arm, echoing the quiet strength he'd shown her before. "We accept your terms, Mr. Pike." Wade Cross started to object, but the steady lift of June Hollis's chin told him her mind was set. They left Grant Pike's office carrying a new loan agreement, 1 month's grace, and an extra $30 added to the note. "That man's a vulture," Wade muttered as they stepped into the bustling Helena Street. 15% is pure robbery. It buys us time, June answered evenly. And time is what we need. A month isn't much, Wade warned. The cattle drives won't reach here before the deadline. June stopped short on the crowded boardwalk. Wade. I need an honest answer. Of course, he said, bracing himself. Are you staying? The bluntness of her question cut through the din around them. If you're planning to move on once we're back, I have to know so I can plan. He hadn't expected to be caught off guard, but he was. For weeks he'd lived from one day to the next, helping her without daring to think about what came after. I don't know. He admitted the words bitter on his tongue. I want to help you save the land, but beyond that. Disappointment flickered across her face before she covered it with a polite nod. I understand. You've already given more than I could ask. June, he began, but she gently cut him off. It's all right. You've done enough. Let's just focus on getting home and finding the money. The trip back to the homestead passed in near silence. June was kind but distant, steeling herself for the day he would ride on. Wade, for his part, grew restless with a choice he couldn't yet make. They returned to find everything in good order thanks to Luke Dugan, the boy Wade had hired to tend the animals. The fields showed a fresh green, and every repair Wade had made still held firm. The place looked ready to thrive, if only they could outlast the debt. That evening, as the sun bled red over the horizon, Wade finally broke the quiet. I've been thinking on ways to raise the money. June turned surprised. Rhett Boone mentioned he's hiring hands, Wade went on. The wages won't cover the whole note, but they'll help. I could work for him and still lend a hand here mornings and evenings. You'd do that, she asked, eyes searching his. Wade nodded. It's not the full answer, but it could carry us through this pinch. June studied him a long time. Why Wade? You could have ridden on weeks ago. Instead, you've taken my troubles as if they were your own. It was the question he'd asked himself night after night. The truth came simple and startling. Because for the first time in years, I feel like I'm where I'm meant to be. Helping you, working this land. It matters in a way that drifting never did. The words felt both freeing and frightening. He had spent half his life avoiding ties so nothing could be torn away. Yet here beside June, he'd found something worth the risk. June's eyes softened. I'm glad you're here. I don't know how I would have managed these weeks without you. The next morning, Wade rode to the Triple P Ranch to see Boone. The rancher greeted him with a firm handshake and an appraising look when Wade explained he'd still spend part of his time at the Hollis place. Got a personal stake there, have you? Boone asked, voice casual but eyes sharp. Miss Hollis is a friend in need, Wade answered evenly. I gave my word to help her. Boone nodded slowly. Admirable. But I need men who give a full day's work. I can pay $3 a day a fair wage, but expect sunrise to sunset 6 days a week. I can start tomorrow, Wade said, but I'll need Sundays free. Fair enough, Boone agreed. Be here at first light. The weeks that followed pushed them both to their limits. Wade labored long hours at the ranch, then rode the 5 miles back each evening to lend a hand at June's homestead. June matched his grit mending fences, tending stock planting crops from dawn until dark. Sundays became their salvation. A whole day, side by side on her land, sharing simple meals and talking on the porch as the mountains blushed in sunset. Those quiet hours drew them closer than either dared to name. In those moments, Wade told her of his years on the trail, the vast country he'd crossed, the rough characters he'd met, and the hard lessons learned along the way. One soft Sunday evening, June, Hollis spoke of her childhood in Ohio, her mother's gentle wisdom, and the teaching career she once dreamed of dreams now reshaped around keeping her Montana homestead alive. "I never thought I'd love this land the way my father did," she admitted, as they shared the first sweet strawberries of the season. "But now, I can't imagine being anywhere else." Wade Cross understood all too well. In little more than a month, the Hollis place had come to feel more like home than anywhere he'd been in 10 wandering years. The idea of leaving by choice or by failure gnawed at him. "We're making headway," he said, checking the figures they'd tallied together. Between his wages from Rhett Boone and the coins June earned selling eggs and milk in town, they'd saved just over $100, half what they needed, with only 2 weeks left before Grant Pike's deadline. "It's not enough," June sighed, shoulders sagging. "Not yet," Wade agreed. But Boone talked about a spring branding bonus. "That could bring another 40. June nodded, still troubled. Wade hesitated, then shared the thought he'd been holding back. "I've got a bit put away, about $70 with a banker in Cheyenne. It was meant for emergencies." "Wade, no." June shook her head hard. "I can't take your savings. You've already given so much. It's just money," he said quietly, though they both knew a drifter's savings meant security and freedom. "It can be replaced. I won't accept it," she insisted. "There has to be another way." But no new way appeared. Boone's branding bonus came through lifting their total to $140, still 90 short interest included. 5 days before the note came due, Wade rode into Riverford to wire his Cheyenne banker, asking that his savings be sent. On his way back, he met Boone on the road, the rancher astride a glossy bay. Cross Boone greeted, drawing up. "Just the man I wanted to see." "I've got a proposition." Wade slowed, curious despite his haste. "What kind of proposition?" "I'm expanding, buying more cattle. I need a foreman, $5 a day, plus a cabin of your own." Boone's offer was generous, better than anything Wade had ever been given. "I'm grateful," Wade began, but Boone raised a hand. "There's more. I know about Miss Hollis's loan word travels fast. I'm still keen on her property, especially the creek. I'll pay $300 cash, enough to clear her debt and leave her a stake to start fresh. As my foreman, you could help her relocate somewhere more fitting for a young woman alone." The meaning was plain. Boone was offering Wade a future steady wages, a home, and a way for June to escape the debt, but only if she surrendered her father's land. "Have you told her yourself?" Wade asked evenly. Boone shook his head. "Figured it'd sit better coming from you. She trusts you." The words hit like a hammer. June did trust him from that first day beside her family's graves. To twist that trust into pressure to sell felt like a betrayal of everything they'd built. "I'll speak with her," Wade said at last, keeping his voice neutral. "But the choice will be hers alone." "Fair enough," Boone replied. "Let me know by week's end about the foreman job and the land." As Wade rode on, the weight of the offer pressed heavy. The practical part of him saw the logic. June could pay off Pike and begin again, and he could finally have stability without giving up his independence. Yet the thought of June leaving her land and of parting from her felt wrong in a way he could scarcely name. Somewhere between mending her roof and standing with her in Helena, between long days of labor and quiet evenings on the porch, Wade had found something he never expected: a home. Not just the barn loft where he slept, but a shared purpose and a deep, growing affection. The realization struck so hard he nearly pulled his horse to a stop. He loved her. Not as a companion in hardship alone, but as a woman he longed to build a life with. The question now was whether June felt the same, and whether he had the courage to find out. He found her in the garden, hair slipping free as she weeded the young corn. She shaded her eyes when she heard him ride in. "You're back earlier than I thought," she called. Finished at Boone's ahead of schedule, Wade said, tying off his horse. "How are things here?" "The corn's coming along fine," June replied, "and the chicken coop repairs are holding no more predators." Wade nodded, proud of her grit, but the choice weighing on him nearly choked his next words. Should he tell her about Rhett Boone's offer or confess what he truly felt? Both weighed heavy, and both felt equally daunting. Wade. June Hollis prompted, noticing his faraway look. "Is everything all right?" "Just tired," he said quickly. "It's been a long day." But as they worked side by side over supper, Wade knew he couldn't keep silent. With only 5 days left before Grant Pike's deadline and his savings still on the trail from Cheyenne, every option had to be laid out. "Boone made me an offer today," he said at last, as they sat down to eat. "Foreman on the Triple P Ranch. Steady job, good pay, a cabin of my own." June's fork stopped midway to her lips. "That sounds like a fine opportunity. Will you take it?" "He also wants to buy your land," Wade added, watching her closely. $300 enough to clear the debt and give you a new start." June set her fork down, appetite gone. "I see. And what did you tell him?" "That the choice is yours alone," Wade said. "I'd never decide that for you." Her eyes searched his. "What do you think I should do?" "You've worked this ground with me. You know what we're up against. I think this place is more than soil and timber," he answered carefully. "It's your family's legacy. Selling should be the very last resort." "And Boone's offer to you?" she asked softly. "Will you accept it?" Here was the reckoning he'd been dreading. Wade drew a deep breath. "That depends. Depends on what? On whether there's a place for me here," he said simply. "Not just as hired help or a passing friend, but as something more." June's eyes widened, a warm flush rising in her cheeks. "More." Wade reached across the table and took her hand. "June. I came planning to stay 2 weeks. It's been nearly 2 months and I can't imagine leaving. Not now. Not ever." Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile lit the room. "I've been so afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of losing the land, yes, but more afraid of losing you, of waking up to find you'd moved on like always." "Not anymore." Wade promised heart lighter than it had been in years. "If you'll have me, I'm staying. We'll face Pike together and make this our home where neither of us will ever stand alone again." June rose, coming around the table. Wade stood and gently drew her into his arms. "I love you, Wade Cross," she said against his chest. "I think I have since that first day when you found me at my lowest and offered help with nothing asked in return." He held her closer. "And I love you, June Hollis, more than I ever thought possible." Their kiss was soft and sure, a promise of all they meant to build. When at last they parted, both were smiling through the tears. "We still have to pay." Pike, June reminded him, ever practical, even in joy. "My savings should arrive from Cheyenne tomorrow or the next day," Wade said. "Together with what we've saved, we'll have enough." "I still don't like taking your savings," she protested. "It's not just your land anymore," Wade told her. "If I'm staying, if we're building a life here, then it's our land, our home, our debt." The next days blurred with work and anticipation. Wade's draft arrived as promised, and they counted out the final dollars needed. They talked late into the evenings about planting larger fields, buying more stock, even building a bigger cabin in time. 3 days before the deadline, they rode side by side back to Helena Wade, carrying the full payment in his saddlebag. This time they entered Pike's office as partners, not supplicants. Pike looked genuinely surprised to see them more so when Wade laid the full amount plus interest on his desk. "I must admit I had my doubts," he said, adjusting his spectacles. Few homesteaders manage to meet their obligations so promptly, especially under such strain. "We're not most homesteaders," June replied, her voice calm and sure. "So it seems Pike conceded writing out their receipt. Mr. Cross, I gather you've decided to put down roots." Wade rested a protective hand on June's shoulder. "Yes, sir. We'll be building our future on that land." Pike studied them a moment, and then allowed a thin smile. "In that case, you may like to know the new railroad survey shows a line passing within 2 miles of your property, near enough to help with shipping crops and stock, far enough to keep your peace." The news caught them off guard, good news that changed everything about their prospects. "Thank you," Wade said, wondering why Pike would offer such a courtesy. "Consider it a wedding gift," Pike said lightly. "I assume that's the direction you're headed." June's cheeks warmed, but her reply was steady. "It is, though we haven't chosen a date." "Don't wait too long," Pike advised, uncharacteristically gentle. "Frontier life is never certain. Take happiness where you find it." They stepped out of his office with more than a receipt. They carried fresh hope and a surprising respect for the hard-dealing man who had shown an unexpected touch of romance. The ride home was pure celebration. With the debt gone and the promise of the railroad ahead, they dreamed aloud of new plantings and stronger buildings. "We should tell Boone we won't be selling," June said as the homestead came into view, "and that you won't be taking the foreman's job." "I'll ride over tomorrow and tell him myself," Wade promised. But Rhett Boone spared him the trip. As they reached the yard, they saw the rancher waiting on their porch, his face unreadable. Mr. Boone June greeted him as she dismounted. "This is a surprise." "Miss Hollis," Mr. Cross Boone said with a curt nod. "I figured I'd stop by and see if you'd made up your minds about my offers," Rhett Boone said, tipping his hat, as he waited on the porch. Wade Cross and June Hollis shared a quiet glance, understanding passing between them. "We appreciate your interest, Mr. Boone," June answered with calm courtesy. "But we've decided not to sell. This land is our home, ours together." Boone's brows lifted slightly. "I see. And the foreman position I'm grateful for the chance," Wade said sincerely. "But my future is here. I'll finish out the week so you have time to find another man." Boone studied them both for a long beat, then surprised them with a warm smile. "Can't say I didn't half expect that. I saw the way you two looked at each other. Reminded me of my late wife and me years back." The simple confession eased the moment's tension. Boone went on. "My offer to buy stands if you ever change your minds. In the meantime, maybe we can talk about water rights. That creek of yours runs stronger than you'll likely need. I'd pay fair money for downstream access." "That sounds worth discussing," Wade agreed. "Perhaps next week after we've had time to think it over." "Next week it is," Boone said with a nod. He tipped his hat once more. "Congratulations to you both. Building a life together, there's no finer thing in this world." With that, he swung onto his horse and rode off, leaving Wade and June standing side by side in the yard that now truly belonged to them both. "He took that better than I figured," June said, as they watched Boone disappear over the ridge. "He's a businessman," Wade replied. "When one deal falls through, he looks for another. A water rights deal could benefit everyone." June turned to him with a playful glint. "So, Mr. Cross, now that we've saved the land and practically announced our engagement to half of Montana, when were you planning to make a proper proposal?" Wade chuckled and drew her close. "Is that your way of saying you're waiting for me to ask?" Maybe she teased, eyes shining. "Though I think you already know my answer." Growing serious, Wade took her hands in his. "I don't have a ring yet, haven't had time to get to town since I realized I can't live without you. But June Hollis, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of building this home and this life with me?" Tears brightened her eyes as she whispered, "Yes, Wade. 1,000 times yes." Their kiss sealed more than a promise of marriage. It sealed the future they were already building together. Through the warm months that followed, Wade and June transformed the homestead. With Grant Pike's debt cleared and steady income from the new water rights agreement with Boone, They added a proper barn, expanded the chicken coop, and began framing a larger cabin to replace the old one. Late that summer, they were married in Riverford's small church with Boone and a few neighbors as witnesses. June wore her mother's blue dress, and Wade a new black suit bought for the day. Afterward, friends and fellow ranchers gathered at their homestead to celebrate turning the quiet place into a hub of laughter and well-wishing. As autumn settled in, they prepared for their first winter together. The harvest had been generous, the livestock healthy, and their new cabin nearly ready with glass windows and a stone hearth to warm the long Montana nights. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, June rested her head on Wade's shoulder on the old cabin porch. "I keep thinking back to that day you found me," she said softly. "I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything worth living for." Wade wrapped his arm around her, but she surprised him by placing his hand gently over her abdomen. Now she whispered a quiet smile, spreading, "I know it was only beginning." The meaning struck him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "June, are you?" She nodded, eyes luminous. "In the spring," Doc Levi Grant confirmed it yesterday in town. A joy deeper than anything Wade had ever known surged through him. From a rootless drifter to a husband, and soon a father, his life had been transformed. "I never dreamed I'd have this," he said thickly. "A home, a family, a future worth fighting for. You gave me all of it." "We gave it to each other," June answered softly. "That day by the graves you could have tipped your hat and ridden on. Instead you stayed. You built this home with me where neither of us will ever be alone again." As the first stars blinked awake over the prairie, Wade and June sat together in the twilight, their hearts as full as the sky above. Behind them, the 3 wooden crosses stood silent and steadfast, a reminder that out of sorrow can rise a life of love and promise strong and enduring as the Montana frontier itself. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.